Alrighty guys, it is Qaaman here today, and I'm bringing you another episode review of Dragon Ball Super, which will be episode 14, which is called The Last Bit of Power, The Battle of Gods Concludes. And in this video, I'm going to be talking about everything ranging from the plot, the action, interesting details, my overall impressions, and my memorable moment, along with my conclusion on the episode itself. So without wasting any more time, let's get straight into this video. So, let me first start off by talking about the plot. Now, the plot was pretty straightforward. It's basically an episode where we're going to see a conclusion in the fight between Goku and Beerus. And obviously, many of the things that happened in Dragon Ball Super were replicated from what happened in Battle of Gods. But there was one thing that this episode had that really helped out its plot, and it would have to be the music. I felt that the musical score for this episode was fantastic. Norihito Sumitomo did a fantastic job in portraying a lot of the pacing that was going on, a lot of the events that were taking place, and a lot of the feel that the characters were going through in many of the situations that took place in this episode. So I felt that the music definitely added to what was going on in this episode as a whole. Now, in terms of the action, man oh man, boy oh boy was I impressed. The action sequences for this episode completely trounce all of the other action sequences that I've seen in Dragon Ball Super to date. It beats episode 8's fight with Vegeta fighting Beerus. It beats Beerus fighting that red alien. It definitely beats Goku fighting Beerus on King Kai's planet. It beats all of those with such a margin that it actually angers me, guys. It angers me because this is what Super is capable of doing. And it just angers me as a fan that they could do so good in some episodes, especially this one, but do so bad in another. Because in my opinion, the only episodes that were really poorly animated in Super so far were episode 5 and to some degree episode 9. And honestly, when you look at this episode as a whole, watching all of the sequences where Beerus is basically using like a technique similar to the multiform, watching the Kamehameha clashes, watching the Beerus and Goku moving at a really fast pace, hitting each other, the motion sequences were not as repetitive as others. I felt that this episode was very entertaining to watch simply because of the action sequences, and it definitely added towards the fight being a lot more massive. It felt like a true battle of the gods, and it was better animated than both episode 12 and 13, which were also fights continuing Goku fighting Beerus. So in terms of action for this episode, I'm gonna have to say it was by far the best we've seen so far in Dragon Ball Super. I could talk all day about it, but I have to move on to the other things. But I just have to say, guys, it actually pisses me off how good it was because of how bad episode 5 and to some degree episode 9 were. Now, moving on to some interesting details, let me point out a major difference between Battle of Gods and Super, and this would be the fact that Beerus fell asleep. Now, the reason why this is major is because of the fact that in Battle of Gods, Beerus showed sympathy towards the Z-Fighters when he basically blew up a rock instead of the entire Earth. And in Battle of Gods, you got the feeling that Beerus kind of took it easy on the Z-Cast. But in Super, what we saw is Beerus fell asleep, and it created a sense of humor and luck for the Z-Cast that you guys basically are lucky to be alive right now because Beerus fell asleep. And Goku basically pushed him hard enough for him to get tired to basically knock out. And there's a reason behind all of this, guys, and the major reason between these differences would have to be the fact that the writers know that Dragon Ball Super is a series that is going to continue, and they already know how it's going to continue. Whereas when you look at Battle of Gods, it was a movie within itself that was supposed to end on its own terms. So when you look at all of that, it definitely shows why they obviously changed the ending the way it was. But I definitely think that this is a lot more, I guess you could say, beneficial for fan services. Fans can now see from Dragon Ball Super that we are going to definitely get more out of the series between Goku and Vegeta, because Vegeta was talking about how it's going to be my turn to transform, and in Dragon Ball Battle of Gods, we didn't know what we were going to get, so that's one good sign for the show so far. Now, the next thing I wanted to point out is that in this episode, Beerus did not mention anything about Whis being stronger than him and being his trainer. Now, he could still be Beerus' trainer, But I felt this was kind of weird because I'm starting to look at Dragon Ball Super in a way as they're kind of rewriting Whis to be weaker than Beerus. Now, Toriyama has stated before that if he were to scale their powers, Goku would be a 6, Beerus would be a 10, and Whis would be a 15, making Whis significantly stronger than both of them. But now, Beerus didn't make that statement, at least in the version of Dragon Ball Super that I saw. And because of that, I'm going to have to say that it's looking like Beerus might be rewritten to be stronger than Whis, but we definitely have to see more of Dragon Ball Super to make that statement. Now, one thing that I also wanted to point out really quickly about what I was saying before with being a trainer, you don't necessarily have to be stronger than somebody to be their trainer. Like, for example, King Kai trained Goku in Dragon Ball Super at that point, at least to some degree, but he's nowhere near as strong as Goku. And the same thing can be said for many other characters. I'm sure Master Roshi could teach many people how to fight who might be stronger than him in terms of teaching them techniques. So that's one thing I just wanted to point out in terms of training somebody as opposed to being stronger. Now, the next thing that I wanted to point out is really quick, and it's basically the fact that Mr. Satan had a significantly bigger role in this episode as opposed to in Battle of Gods, where after the fight with Goku and Beerus, he was just a bystander around. Then nobody was asking him for interviews or anything along those lines, but in this episode, people wanted to have an interview with Mr. Satan about him fighting against Beerus from what we're looking like we're going to see in the next episode. And I felt this is going to add a lot of humor towards the series as a whole. And stay tuned for my predictions video, which will be uploaded a few hours after this one goes up, where I'm going to go more in depth about what I think is going to happen in the next one. But Mr. Satan definitely had a much bigger role in this episode as opposed to originally. Now, moving on to my impressions of this episode, the first thing I wanted to talk about was the tension. This episode gave us the Dragon Ball tension that we were all looking forward to. Those serious moments where something bad can happen. Now, let's be honest, guys. Since Dragon Ball Super takes place in the 10-year gap between Goku defeating Majin Buu and where we see the World Tournament at the end of the series, we all know that it's ultimately going to end on a positive note. And because of the fact that we saw Battle of Gods, we all knew that Goku was going to lose the fight. But what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to look at Dragon Ball Super as if I didn't see anything prior. And if I was watching this as a series on its own, this episode had a ton of tension. The tension needed to drive us as fans into watching the series as itself. Because of the fact that, first of all, it actually felt like Beerus was going to blow up the Earth as opposed to Battle of Gods, where he took sympathy. You really left that episode feeling like, man, they dodged a bullet because of the fact that Beerus basically fell asleep. And that gave us what we needed for it. Even though it did have some humor, because adding that towards it gave us some form of luck for Dragon Ball Super as a whole. And the next thing I wanted to point out is that when we go back to the fight between Goku fighting against Beerus, one thing that I noticed is that it seemed like Goku put significantly more effort into trying to stop that massive energy blast as opposed to what happened in Battle of Gods, where he basically just, stopped it. But in this one, Beerus is actually putting more effort into trying to intensify the blast, which made it seem like, wow, Goku gave everything he possibly could, and that's what made this episode so great, and that's the impression I got. I got the impression that Goku fought this guy for 5 episodes, turned into a Super Saiyan God, lost the Super Saiyan God transformation, but still retained its power and became a Super Saiyan just to stop this purple cat from destroying this planet, and he still lost. That added a lot of intensity, a lot more than what you could do in a fight that only lasts 10 to 15 minutes. That is one thing that Dragon Ball Super did to perfection that Dragon Ball Z Battle of Gods did not do. And to top things off, Vegeta grabbed Goku when he was falling to Earth instead of Beerus basically escorting Goku's body back down, which adds a lot of emotion towards us as characters because Vegeta's an anti-hero and you wouldn't expect him to be holding Goku and grabbing him falling from the sky because of his personality. So that definitely was a bigger improvement than what we saw in Battle of Gods, and I definitely felt the impression was definitely a lot more intense and emotional from what we originally saw. Now, in terms of my most memorable moment of this episode, it would have to be no other than when we saw Hercule, right after Goku was defeated, going to challenge Beerus with the other Z fighters, and he looks behind himself and he sees Videl, and Videl gives him a look like, don't you dare run away from Beerus, and then he just looks forward and walks toward Beerus. I thought that scene was hilarious. The scene said everything it needed to say on its own. It didn't need any description, and I felt that was definitely the funniest and most memorable moment of the episode to me. So guys, that has been my video for today. Overall, this episode has to get a 5 stars because in my opinion, this episode has had the best action. It definitely has been the most intense in terms of emotion and intensity throughout the series so far. I felt the animation was really good. I felt even though the plot was pretty simplistic, it actually concluded. Something major happened in this episode, and because of this, guys, I'm gonna have to give this, guys, a 5-star plus. It was the best episode of Dragon Ball Super so far, and in my opinion, it's one of the best episodes of Dragon Ball in general ever. This episode was the best. I love the changes that were added towards the ending to make it a lot more rich. And I look forward to sharing additional thoughts with you guys in my predictions video, which I'm going to upload very soon, right after this one gets to YouTube. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and most importantly, over everything else, please remember to rate, comment, and subscribe. And remember, as I always say, to have a great day, guys, and please share your most memorable moment of this Battle of Gods arc in the comments section below.